Hey, you guys, this is Dominic from the Joe Schmo Sports Show. We're going to be talking about something that is controversial. We're going to be talking about performance-enhancing drugs. The opinions of our guests do not reflect the opinions of myself, Clint, or Dre, or anybody associated with the Joe Schmo Sports Show. There are going to be some controversial opinions. We do not endorse those opinions. We are willing to have a conversation about this controversial topic because there are some points of view that aren't being addressed for educational purposes. This is a topic of conversation that needs a bit more light on it. Without further ado, let's get to the show.
Coming to you live from Softfleet Studio in beautiful, cold Hillsborough, North Carolina. I'm your host, Clint Clintonian Webb. I am joined, as always, by my co-host, the Dom himself, Mr. Dominic Battistella, and, of course, the man on the ones and twos, Mr. Dre Cameron. And this is the Joe Schmo Sports Show. We're just regular people that know just enough about sports to have this show. And today, we have two very special guests in the studio. We have Mr. Matt Johnson, and we have Mr. Doug Kiesewetter, and he is the owner of the studio that we are in, or proprietor of the studio that we are in.
Yeah.
And we have them in here today to kind of just introduce the studio a little bit, so hear a little bit about Doug and Softfleet and see what that's all about. And then we're going to get into a conversation about steroids in sports. So, before we get into all that, what's going on, fellas? How's things?
Dude, I heard I was supposed to talk about sports ball. I was like, man, I don't know shit about this.
We don't need you to talk about sports ball, Doug. We need you here because we have this steroids and sports stuff that you said you have a lot of insight on, or a lot of. I don't understand why you wouldn't want your athletes to be stronger, more aggressive, higher performers. Well, Daniel Tosh once said, "I like my athletes like I like my video games."
I think pro athletes should be forced to use steroids. I think we as fans deserve the greatest athletes science can create. Let's go. Anything that will make you run faster, jump higher. I have high definition TV. I want my athletes like my video games. Let's go.
Oh, over the top.
And I'm okay with that statement. I mean, I'm a fan of Barry Bonds being in the Hall of Fame, even though I'm not a huge fan of the guy.
You pay people millions of dollars a year to perform feats that you can't do. Why would you not want them to be 10% better?
All true.
10%.
I mean, honestly, the best part is that if you really look at like steroid stuff, like if you talk about like the Gorilla Chemist is a really interesting page to follow on Instagram. Is a guy who does a lot of like breakdowns of the actual like atomic structure of steroids and what they do and like the marketing behind them, which there's not a lot of doctoral research on, like peer review, because it's illegal to do that on humans in the United States. So like you got a guy who's like, well, I have a anecdotal sample of like people who are breaking the law.
Sure.
And when you look at it, like I think that steroids really only provide like a 4 or 5% advantage over your like max natural performance, but that 4 or 5% at the tip of the 99.9% or whatever, like the 0.001% that we
get
are talking about,
the edge.
4% for those guys is huge.
Well, before we get into all the steroid stuff, because that's going to take a little bit longer, tell us a little bit about yourself and Softfleet Studios.
I am a misanthrope who somehow spent an entire lifetime telling people I would not hold a real job and still don't hold a real job. So some friends and I started doing online fitness stuff. We'd all like owned and managed gyms for years, and the opportunity.
CrossFit gyms, right?
Yeah, like I think the attraction to CrossFit as a brand was kind of fading for us, but the affiliation for marketing purposes was still pretty valid. So as we kind of got out of that business, we started selling exercise programming to other gyms because we recognized, like, well, we don't have to have a physical facility. We can just sell programming to gyms. And then that became the focus of Softfleet, which was that we were providing programming for two specific bodies of users. One was guys who are already on teams, so like Green Berets, Rangers, SEALs, who wanted workout plans that worked for them while they were deployed. And then the other body of users was guys that were looking to get in. So we had like a selection prep course to show guys like how to ramp up their training to get ready to go to Special Forces Selection or RASP or whatever.
And so now you're the digital content director for Softly.
Yeah, there's 5 of us. We all made up whatever titles we wanted. Yeah, it was one of those
It's got to
deals.
sound more important than you are, right?
So we know who's in charge. He's the CEO, and then from there on, it gets really like vague. But more than anything, I just field a lot of phone calls all day from people that either want free stuff or they want me to explain the stuff they paid for. It's like
So it's a private gym, and you do workout videos.
the gym is really this is a studio.
Right.
Nobody works out here except us. Like, we have the podcast, we do a lot of videos and content, but really that content machine is just a marketing funnel to push people in to pay a monthly subscription for our training and nutrition app. It's focused towards the military, but it's very popular with first responders, cops, firefighters.
Well, you have a couple 100,000 followers, so I assume it's pretty successful.
Yeah, we're doing really well. I mean, honestly, I hate to rub it into anybody. Who lost
toot
their
your horn,
job
Doug. Toot
during
your horn.
COVID, but COVID's been 2020 was a great year.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I assume within in-home workouts and personal workouts that you can customize for people.
It was interesting because we were worried going into it that people having restrictions on their wallets we would be one of the first things they cut as an expenditure, and we saw a slight drop in membership in that time frame, but most of those people came back, and then we've seen a real big upswell in membership just based on people still wanting to work out in their garage and do stuff on their own.
Sure. The funny thing about the economy dropping as it did was that it probably didn't hit your clients nearly as hard as it hit people on the lower socioeconomic spectrum.
We talk about that too, which is to say, like, we are dealing with an odd captive audience of mostly military guys who are never going to see a cut in their pay or lose their jobs based on an economic constriction. Yeah. So, I mean,
they get paid first. Period.
Well, I mean, sort of. I've definitely been deployed multiple times when the budget was in question and I didn't get paid for a couple months. So it was pretty rad.
Oh, really?
Yeah. You're like, here I am in Iraq or Afghanistan, and oh shit, I'm still not getting paid because dudes in Washington can't figure out how to agree on another pork project.
Well, I did. I was listening to a podcast that you had. I cannot remember the name of the gentleman that your podcast was on, but I think we all 3 listened to that today, and I heard of ways that people used to supplement income while they were, in training or whatever. Something came to mind of a phone booth that you had set up.
Hey, man, I never charged a man for that. I never charged a man for that. It wasn't my fault that the drill
No. You weren't supplementing the income. Other people were
for
supplementing
sure.
the income and getting upset with you about it.
I destroyed the economy of basic training single-handedly. Yeah, man. While we were in training and it became clear to me that I wasn't dealing with Mensa candidates as drill sergeants. So if anybody's listening to this as a drill sergent, my apologies, but I don't think you'll be smart enough to figure out that I'm actually saying bad stuff about you.
Well, Doug is a Green Beret.
I was not when I went through basic training.
Right, and then he was in, he's Special Forces Green Beret, and we'll get into the what you did for that. I think that's a good topic for the next show.
Right on, man. I was just trying to get over all the time.
Sure. Oh, you'll hear about that, Matt. You'll very much enjoy that. So the reason that we have both of you in here today is to talk about steroids in sports. So Matt was an amateur cage fighter, Mr. Matty Ice himself. So he is, and Doug has a lot of.
It started off as something I wanted to be interested in. I was training since I was about 7 years old in Taekwondo, and my mom was like, "Oh, we're gonna toughen you out."
Show karate.
Yeah, I was just like, you're throwing leg kicks and all this kind of stuff.
Daniel-san.
Exactly. Yeah, wax on, wax off.
So you went from Taekwondo
from Taekwondo to Greco-Roman wrestling.
Okay.
Getting into that. But going from that to a little bit of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu into Muay Thai, and then Muay Thai to Krav to the MICMAT program, and just dabbling in all of that kind of stuff. But along my middle school age, I started getting into more competitive fighting, and we started doing, this is when the UFC was big in the, I want to say early 90s, late 80s. That's when it was bare knuckle, kind of crazy.
Dan Severin kicking ass.
Right.
Yeah,
it became a little bit more regulated when I was in 8th grade, and I'm dating myself.
It's got to be Rogan times, right? Dana White and Rogan.
I don't think that Rogan
No,
came into the
Rogan was still doing Fear Factor at that time.
Okay.
But,
Eat the worm.
Yeah, I mean, he was doing some crazy stuff. But it became a little bit more regulated when Dana White picked it up, and it started getting bigger. And I'm talking about when Tap Out first came out.
Yeah.
And now if you see somebody
Tap Out.
wearing Tap Out, you're like, douchebag.
Yeah.
Instantly douchebag.
Well, no, actually, I immediately think I don't want to get in a fight with that guy. He'll win.
Yes.
Right.
True story.
And it's always the people that you look at that have the invisible lat spread going on, the people who did the roids but didn't get anything out of them. They just got
Super
kind
weird.
of fat.
I don't understand how one day a week in the gym and all these steroids aren't working out for me.
Right. It's like I'm eating all the crap and
They
working
told me
out.
when I
Why
did
am
train that I could eat whole pizzas.
I'm in a bulking phase.
Right, yeah, perma bulk. There's like this classic kit that you see with these guys, and it's Converses, it's sweatpants, Monster in the hand, hoodie on in the
about
gym.
Tap Out guys?
Oh, Tap Out guys all day long, and it's
Taking
all they do
personal
is that
inventory
one
right now.
So you were going.
guilty.
So you were getting into cage fighting.
So I was getting into that, and I was working with this dude named Mike out of Morrisville, and he was trying to get me ready for some stuff. I started off in parking lots with friends, just beating the hell out of each other.
Kind of like Fight Club.
A little bit like Fight
Okay.
Club, except we talked about it nonstop.
Kimbo sliced
yeah,
dude.
man.
Yeah.
You don't want him to show up at your party.
I don't know. He got knocked the fuck out. Whatever.
Kimbo
Big
did.
motherfucker though.
Yo,
Yeah.
He's not. He's not. I saw him at the airport. He has his crew's huge. Like the guys that he rolls with are all big dudes.
Maybe that's why it
But
makes
he's
him
like
look smaller.
He couldn't have been much more than 5'8". I mean, he's big.
Oh, he's
swole.
huge. Like,
He's
yeah,
swole.
yeah, yeah.
But he's not.
Yeah.
He's not a big dude.
Yeah,
Right.
he's like Tyson. I wouldn't want to get hit by him.
So there's a
Bro.
lot of guys who you
No.
look at and you're like on TV or on a screen, you're like, wow, that's a big dude.
Mm-hmm.
And I've met some big dudes, and it's funny because like you go from a fighting style to you look at even like bodybuilding, and you see guys like Jay Cutler, you see guys like Phil Heath, you see all these guys, they're gigantic in muscle, like they look super 3D, but stature wise, they're not that big.
Right,
They're
so
like
they're short and
5'5"
stocky.
to 5'8". Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think Ronnie Coleman was.
Oh, I love Ronnie
He's
Coleman.
only like 5'6". Isn't
Yeah,
he?
he's not. He's 5'8". He's not very tall.
Yeah, but he's also
a brick
300
shithouse.
pounds.
Yeah,
like dry.
Custom uniforms for his Dallas PD
mean,
gig.
dude's got veins bigger than my arm.
Yeah, but
So-
now he can't walk.
Well,
So I mean,
you know.
so back to the thing with fighting. I dabbled in that since I was about 7 years old, and I just kept following up with it and stayed in touch with it. I actually came out of that, and I did a lot of stuff in the Marine Corps with it. Got out of the Marine Corps, and I, just like him, got into the fitness world. And in the fitness world, I worked for a big fitness company for 5 years total. And then it did, just like you said, it affected a lot of people with COVID, and I lost my job. And I was a manager in a billion-dollar fitness company.
Right.
And
Well, all those gyms closed practically all across the country.
yeah.
Right?
So we got I
Not
think they
because of
furloughed.
any proven metric that demonstrated COVID was spread in gyms.
So
I'm
they
just saying.
No.
They released
Yeah.
a couple studies.
regardless, it happened. Yes,
Yeah.
right,
It definitely.
So
It's weird that private companies allowed the government to tell them that they could close their doors, but now they're complaining that private companies are kicking people off of their social media platforms.
right.
Yep.
So
That's a good point, Doug.
the
We'll get to
company I'm
that
with-
next podcast.
furloughed 60,000 people in one shot. Now, the first week that we were there and getting our furlough, we're like, oh, we're going to have a week or two off. We're like, this is going to be fine. It's going to be a week or two off. It's going to be great because we were putting in, if you're in the fitness industry, you understand that when you're in sales, you are busting your ass to try to make $1. And
Sure.
every single sale, it's a grind. And you're spending hours and hours and hours in there doing it.
Trying to convince people that their daily Starbucks
Yeah, exactly.
is the equivalent. Come to the gym.
So,
Don't
you
spend
know,
money on Starbucks.
you have somebody who's overweight, or you got a dad who's just like, man, I'm too fat, my wife hates me, and I'm on the verge of divorce, and my kids are driving me crazy. And they come into the gym, and your only job is to convince them that with enough blood, sweat, and tears, that they can have the hopes and dreams of getting that six-pack back again, and they leave the gym with those hopes and dreams on a little plastic card.
Never
That
gonna
says
happen.
good
and they
luck.
never come
gonna
back.
happen.
I'll say, and then it's
Never
up to
gonna
them,
happen.
right?
So,
the gyms are full. What's the gyms are full from January 2nd through January
March.
15th?
No, I'd say
Pretty
March.
much.
So just to be transparent, I worked for Lifetime,
Okay.
and I don't work for them anymore.
The
so,
entire business model was based on 90% non-participation rate.
Yes.
So not Lifetime, Planet.
Oh.
So
Yeah.
Lifetime's member usage is actually insane.
Is it really?
It's through the roof. We have
Lifetime's got the nice facilities,
Yeah,
right?
and
Like there's
Planet
like
Fitness is just
pools
so
and
cheap.
kid care.
you're
and-
low in facilities, which is like we call a small box club. We have roughly 7,000 to 10,000 members depending on the club, and you'll have about 5,000 of those people using the membership
That's crazy.
regularly. The big clubs, the crazy clubs, which I worked in one of those for 3 years.
They're like Disney World.
They are.
Yeah.
They're at a minimum $50 million buildings, and their profit margin is roughly $1 million a month.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
the reality is, from a gym perspective, you don't have a lot of people like giving each other intramuscular injections of steroids at the gym.
Okay, so that's not going on at the gym. The selling of that product, the transfer of that product in the gym, I can tell you right now, I personally saw over, if I'm going to guesstimate, $50,000 worth of actual steroids being moved in that facility.
Well, and that's not very much.
No, it's not a
I
lot
mean, what
in
it
the
ends
grand
up
scheme of
being
things.
is that most of the personal trainers move it to supplement their income, which is pretty shitty.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, those personal trainers will partner up with the salesperson.
Yep.
And
Tell me the dude that looks like he needs a quick bump.
Yeah, no doubt.
I'll give him an 8-ball and some testosterone.
I was about to say it's probably steroids are probably not the only thing going out of there. So how did you
Absolutely not.
see it? How did you see it in the cage fighting arena whenever you got involved?
So I'm going to say right now, you can't have somebody naturally who is, a $145, $155, grabbing dudes who are 200, 300 pound guys they're sparring with and throwing them around like rag dolls. You physically can't maintain that. So when you see guys who are training nonstop, and yes, these guys are putting in work. There's a huge misconception that when you take steroids, that all of a sudden you're going to get jacked out of your mind, that your strength is going to go through the roof, that you're going to turn into superhuman. All steroids allow you to do is to train harder and recover faster.
Yeah.
Right.
You're synthesizing protein faster than the average person. That amount of protein that's being synthesized just allows you to build more muscle. Now, the other misconception is that when you take steroids, you just get just gigantic. Steroids can be used for cutting. They can be used for bulking. They can be used just to sustain.
They increase metabolism, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
you got to eat a lot more.
Yeah.
you have to. And there's certain steroids that like Tren. Well, if you use Trenbolone, it's one of those things where if you take in the carbs, you actually get better results with it as far as putting size on. But as soon as you cut the carbs, you start getting shredded. Now, when I say shredded, I mean you start just losing body fat faster than the average person would.
Sure.
That being said, steroids to promote incredible blood flow ability, and then your pumps are way, way better.
When they all have different characteristics.
Correct.
So, like, there's sprinter drugs like Winnie, etc. Like, there's things that are better for certain purposes than for others.
Right.
Like building strength and
You would never take Tren and be a sprinter.
No.
Tren kills your cardiovascular system and actually makes it harder. So, I mean, if you take Tren...
most testosterones, Decadravon, a lot of those increase your interstitial fluid levels too, which is very like it's a weird thing, but it limits your lung capacity because you're retaining water in your internal organs.
Yeah.
So it like limits the expansion of your lungs and stuff like that. I mean, I'm not a scientist.
Right.
So on a personal note, I'm naturally 175 pounds, and I don't know if is this going to be visual or no. No visual. I'm
Just to be fair, I had estimated him at about 230.
Okay. So I just weighed in today.
Yeah.
I just weighed on the scale, fully clothed at 223.
Okay.
My
So you were really close.
My first cycle,
It's the arms.
I did. I didn't train arms. I trained legs today. That's the thing.
Well,
too.
Hypothetically.
Your arms are swollen.
I don't even give a shit.
Oh man, fuck that.
Whatever. It doesn't even matter. I mean, if someone wants to complain about me or tell me that I'm going to hell or whatever kind of opinion somebody else has
trying to be
about me
better?
for trying to be better, to better myself, you eat a dick. So I went from 175 pounds my first cycle. Within 12 weeks, I was 210.
That's
It's a
lot
big
of
growth,
gain.
right?
That's a lot of gain.
30
So
pounds, yeah.
me personally, I was like, all right, I was working with a coach at the time, and I ran my first cycle of just straight testosterone. I was doing 500 milligrams a week of testosterone cypionate. And I was monitoring my blood. I was getting everything done properly. I was monitoring my diet, and my whole goal was to get over 200.
Because that's the only way to chime in a man-sized conversation.
Honestly, dude,
Literally every big dude I've ever hung out with is like, shut up. You're too skinny to talk in this conversation. You're like, what's the barrier to entry? 200 pounds.
So Doug, we'll come back to this at another point.
That's funny because that's my goal to get to. But I want to get to 200. Maybe 220 would be advisable, but I'm going this way.
Well, see,
down.
here's the thing: is that Doug was in a catch-22 then, because he would have to be 200 pounds to go in a grown man conversation. He would go home and his wife tell him he was fat.
Oh my God, I'm a fat guy!
So it was like
You're not entirely wrong. Like, I came back from my first Afghanistan rotation at like 215 pounds, and my wife is like, oh.
Those MREs will stack it on.
She's like, why are you so fat?
I got juicy titties! What is that?
And then she thought I had gotten a skin condition because my back was erupting like Mount Vesuvius. And I was like, well, it's just
The sweat
the
and the
bad
gear.
water and the body armor.
Yeah.
And yeah.
water.
Yeah. Also, Pakistani pharmacy was making a significant amount of money.
So we were getting our stuff from Turkey. It was getting shipped in from Turkey.
So how did it
stuff.
affect you and others that you saw in the ring?
So in the ring, I never fought on it. personally, but I did see guys that were actually sustaining their weight and their size and the musculature a lot longer and staying in that peak performance period of time that you have. Because when you have a fight, typically guys will cut down certain weight or they'll either go up to hit certain weight classes. The guys who were on stuff, it did make it a little bit easier for them to maintain where they needed to be or get to where they needed to be. The endurance was a little bit better. The strength was a little bit better. You were able to hit harder. You were able to move faster. You were able to do all these things. But it did not cause you to be a better fighter. And I'm using air quotes because the skill
technique.
It all comes down to technique.
Sure.
You can be a 300-pound monster at 2% body fat, but if you get in there with a guy like a Gracie brother, or you get in there with Conor McGregor, any of those guys who have the technique, they'll hit that guy. They'll knock him out every single time.
That was always my argument for Barry Bonds. It's like, yeah, it may have made him bigger, but it didn't change his baseball skill.
Well,
he was a surefire Hall of Famer before he went.
But we should really talk about the fact that like if
his
you're-
head size.
If you're a lily white-handed church goer who doesn't want to do performance enhancing drugs, you shouldn't be a professional athlete.
That's very true.
Like,
Well,
and
no,
if you
certainly could be a professional athlete, but
Well, you gotta be
don't
funny.
get you
like Yogi Berra, right?
But,
Like,
but, you don't, but is your point maybe that you don't get to bitch about the people that do?
no. The
Or-
point is that you're competing. Like the known playing
Yeah.
field is a bunch of people who are paying money to be on a program.
Yes.
And if you're not on a program and you want to compete in professional sports and all you want to do is bellyache that these other dudes are cheating and that's why you're not as good at them, you can go fuck yourself.
Yeah.
Well,
You shouldn't be in sports.
Yeah, I get
so
that.
in professional sports,
Yep.
and let's talk about like the majors, right?
Yeah.
What percentage of athletes do you figure are utilizing performance-enhancing drugs?
99.9%.
I was about to say, take out UFC from this.
No, I mean,
Okay.
like,
I'm
every-
talking about football, baseball,
99.9%.
hockey, basketball, all
Yeah.
of that.
Of
Yes.
some sort.
Yeah,
You talking
absolutely.
about recovery
It
or
doesn't
bulking
it
or
doesn't. This is where things get super spicy.
Okay.
There are doctors, mostly from Florida, who contract their services to every major professional sports team, to my knowledge. Like I'm not like it's not like I'm looking at the transfers of money, but I am aware of multiple doctors who are consultants for professional sports teams as anti-aging specialists, as functional medicine doctors, and all of those things involve very carefully curated prescription-based performance-enhancing drugs.
TRT.
Yep. Testosterone replacement therapy. And it's literally going, hey, man, we've just cut out the middleman. Now, it's not like the whole, what was the baseball scandal?
The IGF-1?
No, before that, when it was part of it.
Yeah.
But it was like the growth hormone combined, but it was the doctor who wasn't a doctor. In
right. The
Florida.
Barry Bonds doctor, Jose Canseco's
Jose
doctor.
Canseco, yeah.
Right, sure.
I mean, he had all those guys back
The,
then.
Yeah.
The name of the company, whatever it was, there was a big scandal on it, and it was funny because they did this like movie where the kids reenacted the adults roles.
yeah.
There was a bunch of like 10-year-olds pretending like they were adults and like they had wigs on and stuff. It was pretty hilarious. But like that was brought into question because
Balco,
that's the one, yeah. And those guys were doing it in fits and starts, but A-Rod was the one that really boiled it over because he was being a petulant kid and he was trying to like roll on other people and like act like he didn't do anything wrong. The attitude in sports is if you're on a program, you can't talk about it. You have to publicly deny it, and you have to shame anybody else who might possibly be on performance-enhancing drugs because it's the only way to protect yourself from the fact that you're doing it.
If 99.9% of them are getting caught, or not getting caught,
When they're doing
it, one, how are they not getting caught?
Money.
And two,
They have a program, and the program is specifically geared. If you look at the Balco thing, the guys who got caught violated the program. They literally weren't taking the dosages as prescribed by their air quote doctor.
right.
And therefore, when testing time came around and they were out of sync with like the actual like breakdown of the different
Interesting.
substances, they're getting caught during drug tests. And it's the same thing. Like you guys watch the.
How are the guys getting caught now?
So if you notice, and this is all right. So I'm going to get into this is a conspiracy theory. I'm going to say it.
Ooh, I love
right-
it. Let's do it.
Yeah, I'm going to say it right out front. If you look at places where drug testing is prevalent now or becoming more prevalent, areas where it was the Wild West before, where everyone clearly was doing steroids,
Football.
CrossFit,
CrossFit,
cough,
UFC.
cough like UFC, right? They're doing
Absolutely
quote unquote unannounced random drug tests of athletes,
Right.
But they're not testing.
Okay, so it's just a farce.
Well, no, they're testing, but they're not testing premier athletes. Like if you look when the scandals happen and people are pissing hot, it's all mid-tier athletes. They're just famous enough for people to know who they are, and it like to mean something that they're censoring them. But like you're not talking about like Tom Brady isn't getting.
I was just gonna say
he's not
Tom
gonna get
Brady.
pissing. He's not gonna piss hot for freaking testosterone because Tom Brady knows like the NFL can't have Tom Brady piss hot for something.
They're also giving up a guy, not the Tom Brady's and not the guys who are the top tier guys.
But they'll give up a Will Fuller.
But they will because it's a head to roll. It's someone to focus on. It's
somebody
hitting that
famous
number.
enough.
Yeah, it's hitting that number, but not exposing the people who they actually make the real money on.
Yeah, because you don't.
And you're talking about a closed plate. I mean, this is they're voluntarily drug testing. This isn't like the Olympics where there's an overarching drug testing plan to make sure all these amateur athletes aren't cheating.
Unless you're Russian.
Which is hilarious. But no, I mean, that's the other thing, right? Like if you look at the Icarus movie, the documentary about the Russian doping program, the U.S. literally, like half of the reason the U.S. was trying to get people to come and defect from Russia was we could model our program after the Russians, because we too, like, we developed the use of TRT on our Olympic athletes because we wanted to win medals.
Well, so if I'm not mistaken, to my recollection anyway, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I think Michael Johnson was the first big Olympic athlete to get caught
He was on winning,
doping.
wasn't he? I think he was on winning.
Yeah, and that was in the 80s,
but
early 90s.
This is when I really want to wind back a little bit. Which
Talk
is
about
to say,
1940s?
Yeah, I mean,
Please.
testosterone is a natural occurring hormone in your system. Everything that's happening, that's like all of the chemicals that guys are taking, not all, but a variety, are really just boosting a naturally occurring hormone or, some sort of naturally secreted product in your body. We know what's in it. And we know what the consequences of using it are because it's just a natural, it's exogenous. It's not naturally occurring in your body, but it is something we know what it is. And it's hilarious that in modern medicine, we're cool with giving people antidepressants, SSRIs, a bunch of things that fuck people up to fix problems. But it is forbidden to engage in like administering natural hormones to people who have problems.
Well, it's like talking about, going from testosterone and TRT dosages, which is, 125 milligrams to 250 milligrams, depending on how liberal your doctor is.
Like I'm on doctor prescribed, and I take like 60.
60.
And
Okay.
my baseline testosterone numbers are like in the 700s.
Okay. So when I had all my blood work done, and right now I just started a new cycle of TRT dosage, and my TRT dosage is going to be 1 full cc of 250 milligrams. So I'll pin Monday and Thursday, and that'll put my levels somewhere around 1,000 to 1,200. But I was on a higher dosage. I've done a
for
gram.
like 2 years.
Yeah, I did a gram a week at one
and
point.
when I brought my dosage down, my actual free testosterone went up.
Right.
So like I was on too much.
Less is more sometimes with this stuff. And that's why you should.
But this is also, like, to clarify, because we're talking about this from a sports standpoint,
right,
and then we're talking about it from personal use,
right?
Especially the way that our society is right now, as far as like stress with work environment, and for people who've deployed and been exposed to toxic exposures, the reality is that our endocrine systems are suffering greatly. So you see a lot of people in their 30s with dangerously low testosterone levels from their sleep, their diet, their lack of exercise. You can fix those things.
Speed up too.
I've fixed those things like naturally, but what I find is if one of those things went awry, like if I didn't sleep for a while, then my numbers would tank. I'd feel depressed and have issues, and I could go grind through it, but it just wasn't a good life, and I thought I was losing my mind. So like the idea of using TRT from a medical standpoint is vastly different in my mind than using it from a performance standpoint.
Well, then let me ask this then. So why is it frowned upon, or not frowned upon, it's straight up illegal in sports to administer something to yourself or have a doctor do it that makes you heal faster?
Hey guys, thanks for joining us for part 1 of our conversation with Doug and Matt about performance-enhancing drugs. We're glad you joined us. To hear the answer to Clint's question, you're going to have to join us in part 2. We'll catch you on the flip side. Cut to the theme music.
Schmo.